Hello, how are you today? We're so glad to see you. You know, today begins our bonus week for the Right Start Online Summit. It's pretty exciting. You're going to see some familiar faces today because 3 presenters from the summit have agreed to come back and tell us even more. For example, today Tracy Crump is returning with us. She's going to edit 3 short works live. We're going to see how that editor mind works, how the tools are, and she's going to review that for us so we can understand when we hire an editor, what is it exactly they're going to do for us? How is our message going to be tighter or more effective? Hi, I'm Patricia Durgan, and this is Marketers on a Mission. We present marketing tutorials and interviews by and for Christian writers, speakers, and artists. This month, as you know, we are presenting the Right Start Online Summit. Excuse me. 20 now with the bonus week, 25 experts are sharing 25 secrets in 25 days. That's a little bit of an adjustment from last week. This is episode number 231. We're going to watch 3 submissions professionally edited live with writer and editor Tracy Crump. Hello, Tracy. How are you today?
Hey, Patricia, I'm doing fine.
We are so glad that you're here. We already have people here who have joined us. When we're finished with your part of the presentation, the masterclass, then we're going to cover a little bit of information about the Mid-South Christian Writers Conference. And you know a little bit about that, don't you?
Well, yeah. Last 6 years, but yeah.
Were you there from the very beginning, Tracy?
From the very beginning, I sure was. Yeah.
And what role do you play there?
I am the registrar, and I'm also presenting a workshop along with Andy Lehman on Friday afternoon called Stirring the Pot, Writing for Chicken Soup for the Soul. So we're going to be some busy people.
I'd really like to attend that someday if the Lord allows.
Oh, we'd love to have you.
Marlene Houck is here, Barb Haley, Shirley Brasius, Judy Morrow. Everybody's saying, hey, can't wait to hear this. Everybody's interested. We're on board. We have some others who haven't chimed in yet, but that's fine. We don't mind if you talk. You're welcome to. You're welcome not to. You do what's best for you, and we're going to be here to serve you. Let's see. If you will, go ahead and show us what you have to. You ready to get going?
I am. Well, first I want to thank everybody who submitted a piece to be considered for editing. You've got some talented writers in your tribe. You know that, Patricia? You do. So I'm going to share my screen for the first one. And it is actually, let me put my cheaters on, but here we go. It's actually a fiction piece. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so we can this may be already bigger.
Yeah, it looks good.
It does look good. Okay, all right. Well, let me explain just a little bit about. I do editing, but I also do critiquing, and I do it a little differently because when I critique, in our critique group, everything shows up as like a bubble on the side. It's a comment on the side. So in other words, we don't do anything in the actual piece itself because it gets too confusing when you make changes in that, and then you've got critiques from 5 different people. You can't incorporate. It's harder to incorporate all those changes. So we do it as suggestions. When I edit, though, they're paying me to do the little things like change not all the punctuation, but change punctuation to improve all that. But if I make suggestions for bigger changes, I will do that in a comment to the side because my philosophy is that this is the writer's piece, and it's up to him or her to change it. So I don't do major changes like that, but I do what I call just suggestions. And so the 2 buttons that I use the most when I do editing or critiquing either one would be the home screen. And I'm just doing like a little tutorial right now because a lot of people want to become a part of a critique group, but they really don't know how it works. And we use Microsoft Word, and then the home page. Sometimes I'll use, if you can see my little cursor, we'll highlight things sometimes. Like if I wanted to highlight this word and make a suggestion or something, or a comment about it, I might do that. Or if I see that you're using a lot of the same word, a lot of times we don't realize in our writing that we're using the same word over and over until somebody points it out. So I might highlight, if you're using him a lot, I might highlight that several times, and I don't have to say anything about it. You'll see automatically that you've used it a number of times, and maybe you want to change some of those. And then the other button that you would use would be the review button. And here's where you hit track changes. And then any changes that I make in the piece will show up with track changes. So if I put a comma here, which you don't need a comma there, but if I put a comma, then it will show up. So anyway, I just wanted to explain that to help everybody if they needed to get a critique group and become part of a critique group, that they would kind of know what they're doing. So we're going to talk about this piece now. This is, like I said, it's fiction.
Now this is editing it now, right?
We're going to edit it now. Mm-hmm. And as everybody probably knows, the opening, the first page is so important, and especially the first paragraph, because we want to hook our reader. And so that is, and I think this writer has done an excellent job. But we're going to talk about a couple of things here. So I'm just going to I'm going to do most of this verbally, only because you don't want to sit here and watch me typing out what I would type to the author. So we're going to do most of this verbally. So let me just kind of read a little bit. Matt Donaldson parked his 1957 Chevy Bel Air next to a grove of oak trees on a desolate country road where no one would see him and those with him. That's an ominous opening to me. I mean, he's obviously hiding, something's up, there's trouble coming. But what I would suggest is you've got a lot of details in this, and there are times details are good, and there are times that it kind of can take away a little bit. So my suggestion would be to delete this about the oak trees, unless it's important to the story. Now, I just have a small little bit of it. So if it's important to the story later, then leave it. But if not, I would delete that. And then the author, in just a moment, is going to introduce us to the people who are in the car with him. So I don't think we need to say, and those with him. So that would leave Matt Donaldson parked his 1957 Chevy Bel Air on a desolate country road where no one would see him. To me, that tightens it and makes it even more ominous. We don't need, if you have too many details, it can take away from the feeling of the first line. So I think that would maybe make it a little better. The second line, a 6-pack of beer and 2 joints already coursed through his system. That catches my attention. Oh my goodness, trouble's coming now. But this is what I would say. That is kind of like telling, and we know that we want to show rather than tell. And usually a scene, each scene is through one character's point of view. And usually it's whoever appears first in that scene is usually the point of view character. So why don't we just go ahead and jump into his head? Let's say with a 6-pack of beer and 2 joints already coursing through his system, he was ready for anything, or he was ready to conquer the world, or he was ready to tackle anything. Something like that would kind of put us right in his head and still get the idea across that he had a 6-pack of beer and 2 joints. That's just a suggestion that I would make in a little comment box off to the side to this writer. And the writer may or may not take it. That's fine. All right, now let's look at this next sentence, because there are 3 things I want to point out here. First of all, rear view does not have a hyphen, and we're going to talk about that later. Hopefully, if we have time, we've got even a little exercise that you can do, because it's hard a lot of times to tell if a word's hyphenated or a compound word or 2 different words. So that's one thing I would just take that out. I would delete that. That's not showing up very well on my screen. Hopefully it is on yours. But another thing is he examined. All right, that is what's called a filter word, or filtering word. And they're like heard, saw, looked, smelled, thought, felt, knew, wondered, realized, noticed, observed. They're words that take us out of the story. They take us out of that character's point of view. So instead of saying something like that, just tell what he saw or what he did, okay? So, and we're actually going to see a couple more of these later on, and we'll talk about that then too. But what I really want to say about this sentence is, I have learned or have been told and read over and over that when you describe a character or have a character describe himself, don't have him look into a mirror. That has been overdone. And so not to do that. So here he's looking into the rearview mirror and describing himself. Well, where does that leave you? You want to describe this guy, and this is especially important here because this author has a good reason for describing him right now. She's not just telling he has blue eyes and blonde hair. She's talking about how scruffy he is, how greasy, dirty he is. So she's got good reason to do that. That immediately gives us an idea of what this character is like. So instead of saying examined himself in the rearview mirror, how about saying he raked his hands through his greasy hair and he pushed back his greasy hair. How about that? He pushed back his greasy hair and his hand slipped down to his scruffy face, unshaven for several days. Something like that. That just kind of gives you the idea, and you can say it. You've described him without having him look at himself. Okay? All right. Now, next we say Matt focused his eyes on the rearview mirror to check on the children. So, okay, now we already know there are children in the back seat. He observed 5-year-old Jeff, who had an open beer can in one hand and a joint in the other. Oh my goodness, that just disgusts me. Immediately I know this is the worst dad on earth. But I'm kind of overwhelmed. Maybe I'm just been secluded, sheltered all my life or something, but I can't imagine a 5-year-old with both a beer can and a joint. I can't really imagine a 5-year-old with either of them, but I know it happens. But to me, that's too much. I would limit it to just one thing. And plus, a 5-year-old, they're going to be spilling the beer and burning the car up with the joint. So I think it would be better to limit it to one. So what about something like 5-year-old Jeff slurped on an open beer can, or slurped his beer out of a beer can, something like that. That would still get the idea across without being too much. And then Matt turned to his brother Dave and pointed toward the back seat. That's my boy. Jeff's going to be just like me. Dave smiles and says, "Yeah, he'll probably be in prison before he's 18." That's another very telling statement there. That even this boy's uncle thinks he's going to be in prison. That's well done. I think it's very well done. I might suggest that you look up and see kids are being tried as adults, even younger. That you might even say he's 14. That might even make it a little bit more shocking. And he says, "Do you want another beer?" Okay, we'll go down. All right, then Matt looks into the mirror again. Okay, and then a couple of paragraphs down, he looks in the mirror again. We've got him looking in the mirror 4 times. That's too repetitive. Hopefully we're going to remove that first look in the mirror where he's looking at himself. We've already talked about that, so that'll remove one. I would limit the looking in the mirror, okay, maybe to 1 time even, that he looks in the rearview mirror and looks at the kids behind him. So this time he's looking at his 4-year-old Carla, and she's, and this is one thing too, is you want to separate one character's actions or dialogue from another character's actions or dialogue. So this would not go in the same, these 2 things would not go in the same paragraph. So you would need to start, a new paragraph there. And you see how I showed that I formatted. And so she's complaining that Sammy just touched her, and his hands are all covered with snot. And the daddy says, "Well, he's just a baby. Wipe him on his shirt. Stop that crying." To me, we already know this is a pretty low-life character, this dad is. What about something more like, "Oh, shut up," or just, quit sniveling. Or maybe he turns around in the seat and says, just, instead of looking in the mirror, she says what she says first, and he turns around the seat and says, "Quit sniveling. He's just a baby. Just wipe it off." And these are all just suggestions, but just thoughts that might help improve the manuscript a little bit. Okay, then we've got Matt looking in the mirror again, so we don't want to do that. I don't see any reason really here for him to look in the mirror so much. And because he's talking to Dave. He says, "We better get moving. Where the liquor store in Dewey closes, did you bring your gun?" And so then Dave asks, "Are we going to take the kids along?" "Sure. That way the kids will be a perfect cover." These are all great. This is all great dialogue because it shows the character of these characters. It shows us what they're like without you trying to tell. This is showing instead of telling. So this is great. And then he turns on the car, and they head out. I think you could probably tighten that last paragraph there. We already know they're going to Dewey, because that's where they talked about the liquor store being, and they're going to go there. All right, I'm going to scroll down. Now, you see this little symbol here. She has used that to indicate a scene change. Usually, and especially in a manuscript that you're going to submit, you're going to just use 3 asterisks to indicate a scene change. They might use something fancy this in the final manuscript in the book itself, but usually you'll just use 3 asterisks. And then, oh my goodness, Frank Peretti, move over. This is something here. All right. Fear consumed Jeff as he observed a creature covered in black scales. Already, I hate to say this, already I've forgotten who Jeff is. Jeff is the 5-year-old, but I've already forgotten who he is. So we need a little bit of a reminder. What I would do is say, Jeff cowered in the corner, clutching his beer can. And that would, I think, okay, the beer can, okay, I think that would bring it back to mind that Jeff is the little boy. Let me make one more suggestion too. You've got Jeff, you've got Mike, you've got Dave. All good names. All start with different letters, which is a good thing when you're trying to keep characters differentiated. But they're all one syllable names. And to me, I'm already getting them mixed up. So how about giving Jeff a 2 or 3 syllable name, maybe Jimmy or Jeffrey or Jeremy, something like that. And then I think I would have been more likely to remember his name, just because it was not a 1 syllable name like the other 2. So he sees this creature, and once again we've got observed. And do you see how that kind of takes us out of his viewpoint? We want to be in Jeff or Jeffrey's viewpoint. I'll call him Jeffrey, because all of a sudden he is seeing some horrible creature. So we don't want to say that. We want to say he's cowering in the corner, and then we can say a creature covered in black scales creeps out of the darkness and crept out of the darkness and sat beside him. Do you see how that more keeps us in his viewpoint? We're cowering in the corner with him as this horrible creature appears. And then you can go on with it's good description. Its red eyes glowed in the darkness, blood dripped from its fangs. Talks about battle scars, and then it licked the blood from its lips. And then it speaks. And you know he's planning on Jeffrey growing up to be even a worse person than his father. And then he's going to take over Dave, who is Jeffrey's uncle, basically, take over his body, and who knows what's going to happen after that. So this just throws us into another world right here. And then you see we have another scene break, and she starts out with Donaldson's car. Well, I didn't remember Mike's last name. Matt's last name. So I would just stick with one designation. Usually it's a whole lot better if you stick with one designation for each character pretty consistently, and then we don't get mixed up who is who. So they're pulling up to the drugstore, pulling out. Dave is pulling out his pistol. So you know what they're going to do. They're going to rob this drugstore. And then I think this was just probably an oversight here that that's supposed to be an indentation there. And so I would go through and do these smaller things just in the text itself. And let me go back and say, when I edit, and I may be the only person who does this, I send my client 2 copies of what I've done. The first copy is going to show every little thing, every little change I've made. The second copy, I'm going to accept. You see up here at the top, you have the opportunity to accept the changes, accept or reject the changes. I'm going to, in the second copy, accept all those changes and basically clean up the manuscript, but it will still leave the comments off to the side that they can choose to accept, choose to incorporate or not incorporate. And that way, to me, it's a lot easier to read through. I want to send them the first copy so they can see even the small changes I made in case there's something that they disagree with there. Because sometimes I will change a word or switch a sentence around, or put a sentence in a different place, whatever. And so they will have the opportunity to see those too. But anyway, getting on with this. So Dave is looking, and then Matt holds the pistol up, okay? Tells them he's gonna rob them, basically. You'll put your money in this bag. And the clerk is trembling. And then he says, once again, this is one of these filtering words, noticed. Matt noticed movement to his right. Just say, a flicker of movement caught Matt's eye. Someone walked out of the office and stepped behind one of the shelves. I would say hid behind one of the shelves. And then maybe Matt waved his gun to Dave, check over there. Do you see how that keeps us in his point of view? Instead of Matt noticed, say just tell what he saw. You don't have to tell that he saw something, just tell what he saw, and that keeps us in his point of view. All right, so that's basically everything here. I think it's very good. I think a few changes will tighten it up and make it even stronger, and I think this is a good job. I'm going to stop sharing here so that you can see if we have any questions about what we've covered so far.
Okay, I'm loving this. I'll just tell you right up front.
Okay, good.
I'm the first person to respond, but others have responded, and here's the proof. What you just showed us, everything, the very first paragraph. What is that movie with Tom Cruise? I can't remember what it is, but you had me at the first paragraph, Tracy.
Okay. You had me at hello. Is that the one?
Yes, you had me at hello. And also that last paragraph, I understood everything you said, but I really valued that last paragraph too, because I've heard show, don't tell. But that's a really subtle, impactful example of that. I'm in Dave's skin, and I sense movement.
Right.
Rather than I'm telling you something moved over there on the side. That was a really good example of that.
Okay.
Okay. Barb Haley had a suggestion about the child's name. She suggested, a child's name often is, Jeffy.
Yes.
If you keep him at 5 years old, that might be a good way. That's 2 syllables. Obviously, if you hear Jeffy, you're going to expect that that's going to be a small child.
Right.
Janet McHenry says, this is excellent teaching, Tracy.
Oh, thank you.
So Judy Morrow agrees completely. Janet goes back to say, I think English teachers would appreciate this video to teach students how to write effective personal essays.
Oh, well, good. Okay.
Let's see. Angie, I answered this for you while you were talking, but you can correct me if necessary. Angie Mays is wondering, when you see things that are complimentary, you would include those remarks as well, right?
I do. Yes, I do. But I really enjoyed this piece. I do. And I like I said, I think Frank Peretti better move over. Yes, I would definitely. Let me say this though, in editing, I usually don't, because it takes more time. I don't explain why you don't need a comma here or why you need a comma here, because they're paying me to do that. And I don't want to take more time to explain. The only things, and I know Dawn mentioned this last week, that she does tend to make explanations about why she wants changes made, or why she would like to see changes. And I'm sure she's not talking about every comma, because once again, they are paying me and they don't want me to take more time to explain that. And I always make it clear in the contract that you are welcome to ask questions about any changes I suggest, anything. But it would only be the bigger changes that I would explain, just for the time factor.
And that is true or false. That's one of the uppermost differences in a critique, where you're training someone,
right?
And an edit where you're doing the work.
Exactly. That's
the goals are different.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Let's see. There was something else.
But I will say too that I have had clients really make improvements just from seeing what changes I have made in previous pieces that they've had me edit. Well, I'm doing one right now that it is so clean. The copy is so clean, and I think he's just learned, through the process of what he needs to do better.
Okay.
So I think it helps.
We all hope so, because it's an investment. You hope that it's going to be worth your time, and you're not going to continue making the same mistakes. You're going to get better, and then a little bit better, and then a little bit better still.
Right.
But that's by having exposure to someone who knows more than you know about the editing process, and whether it's shared or not shared, you see it. And for most of us, we can pick up on it and see the reason ourselves. Do you think that that's true?
Yes, I think it's good if we can become our own best editor. That's right.
Evelyn Mann says this is a great critique session. Lee Pollock says thanks. Excuse me. Sherry Hunt says you shared such great details, Tracy, per sentence. I like the idea of a preteen, 12 to 14 years old. Christy Horion says this was really good. We've got two more. Don't go anywhere. This was really good, both the story and the edit. Just a side note, you probably wouldn't hold a 45 high. You'd hold it with your arm straight out.
Okay.
But you might also say he's leveled it at the man's head. A 45 is a huge gun and gets pretty heavy. It's a fave since Dirty Harry made it crazy popular, but it's really a heavy gun. Thank you, Christy.
Good point.
Okay.
All right. You ready to
Yes.
go on to next? Okay.
Keep going.
All right. Let's see. Let me find it. Okay. Can everybody read that pretty well? Is that big enough? All right. Okay. Now this one is a chicken soup for the soul story. That's the intended market, and so this is, of course, nonfiction. Chicken soup are supposed to be true stories, and I love the casual tone of this writer. It's just a real free. I like her voice, and I know probably most of you know this is in a different font. We normally use Times New Roman 12-point font, double space. She's got double space. But whenever you make a submission, that's what's the preferred font and size, just so that you know. But this is fine. This is easy to read here for us. She's called it Baby Boomers and Sandwiches. Now, she starts off saying, baby boomers are often, and this is for the book, I think it's called The Golden Age. So this is for people, are supposed to be stories about people 60 or older. So my generation. But she starts off saying baby boomers are often referred to as the sandwich generation. Well, why? Well, think about it. As baby boomers, many of us are finding ourselves sandwiched between supporting our children or grandchildren and caring for elderly parents. First of all, I want to say in Chicken Soup for the Soul, we don't use present tense.
Don't use what?
Don't use present tense. They specifically say, and one of this is in their guidelines, and I'm saying it pretty much the way they're saying is they say don't get fancy with your tenses. They say if it happened in the past, tell it in the past tense. It's just too confusing, to use present. So that's one thing I would say throughout is to change this back to past tense.
Okay.
But also this first paragraph is more like something you would use in an article rather than a story. In articles, we impart information, and which is what she's doing. Baby boomers are often referred to as a sandwich generation. So I would start out with something more like, I never thought of myself as a sandwich. That would kind of get people's attention, hook the reader, and then go on to say, but that's where my baby boomer husband and I found ourselves, sandwiched between supporting our children or grandchildren and caring for elderly parents. Okay, so that still gets the idea across without so much telling the reader as if it's facts and figures. So I think that might be a better opening for a Chicken Soup for the Soul story. Also, one thing I want to point out about this particular paragraph is she switched from third person, from first person. Well, she actually went from third person to second person, then to first person. But most of this is going to be in first person. But generally in Chicken Soup for the Soul story, you don't want to use second person. That's also more like in a how-to article, or there's other pieces that you might use second person, but usually not in a chicken soup for the soul story. So when you say why, well, think about it. You're talking to the reader, and that's not what you usually do in a chicken soup for the soul story. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's something to keep in mind. Now she goes down and she talks about, and I'm right here with her because I understand about taking care of elderly parents and trying to do everything at once. In this second paragraph, though, she's basically repeating what she said in the first paragraph. While my husband and I are not supporting our children financially, we do support their need of babysitters for our grandchildren. And with both of our mothers being quite elderly, we become responsible for much of their care. So, yep, we are definitely sandwiched between the two. That to me is a lot of repetition. I would probably just work in later that you, in like maybe this next paragraph, that you are not only babysitting grandchildren, but you're taking care of your 96-year-old mom. You just don't want, you're very limited in a chicken soup for the soul story. You can't go over 1,200 words. So use your words wisely. You don't want to repeat any more than you have to, and you shouldn't have to. Right here too, and this is something I want to point out, is that, and this is a common error I've seen more and more, it seems like the past few years, is mothers is plural. And with both of our mothers, apostrophe S makes it possessive, and that's not your point here. So be sure not to use apostrophes unless you're using if you're making something possessive. So you would not have an apostrophe there. So I would, if I were editing, I would take out that apostrophe there. Oops, I forgot to put on track changes. That's why I didn't show it. Whoops, and I can't get back to the top now, but that's okay. We get to review, and I'll put on track changes. Okay. So she goes down and talks about her mom being 96, and I love this phrase she uses for her. She's transitioned from being a vibrant, get her done kind of woman to a life filled with limitations. I love that. Right there, you get the idea. Her mom sounds like my mom. She was always on the go, always doing, and once she became ill, then her life changed. And then she's saying now, while she's blessed to remain in her home, she now requires constant care. And then she goes on to tell that much of that care has become her responsibility. And I like then what she says about she finds her own life being directly affected by the transitions of her mom's life. That to me, I like that. And I would probably tell the person that I really like that line there, that your mom's limitations are now kind of becoming your own. So then she goes on to tell about making memories with her grandchildren and how 3 of them live nearby, but the others are, I think I would probably condense this a little bit, where she's telling about where they live, although it's pretty condensed there. And I think she actually put an extra period there, so I would delete that period in front of the exclamation point. And so she's saying that travel is required if she wants to be around her other grandchildren, but then that puts her in a dilemma, which is good that she's saying that while she wants to go and be with her grandchildren, she can't just take off and leave because her mother needs her there. So she's setting up the problem very, very well. She's telling why her mom's illness is affecting, how it's affecting her so much. And then how that turns around and affects her emotions because she's on the mountaintop at 1 minute with her grandchildren, and then she's in the valley having to care for her mom and trying to find that balance. And I think that's very, very well stated. Now, well, I hope this is not making everybody dizzy, me scrolling down. But she goes in to say she was ashamed to say that she was focusing on herself, and that the resentment began to build when she, like I said, when she couldn't go visit her children and grandchildren out of state. Let me read a little bit. She's right now depressed, so she almost is entering depression. And after weeks of that, she was teetering on the edge. Then she realized that she was centering her focus on her mom instead of, and when she changed the center of her focus to her mom instead of herself, then things got better. And she realized what a good mom. And I'm just really there are not a lot of little corrections that I need to make here. It's just that some of this probably could be condensed and tightened just a little bit, because she says the negativity returned and she felt worse than before and felt guilty. And then finally, in desperation and prayer, she searched the scriptures and found that if she focused on cooperating with God, that He gave her the power to desire and please Him in this sandwich situation. And then she could find some balance. Now, this is one thing I want to say about Chicken Soup for the Soul, because I have written for them so much. And this is something that I really stress in my workshops, is that Chicken Soup for the Soul is not a Christian series. A lot of people think it is, I guess because it mentions soul, but they are a general market series. And because of that, we have to stay we're kind of walking a fine line. They do let us talk about a little bit about our faith. They'll let us mention our faith. Christian faith even, but you can't focus on that. Can't really be the focus of your story. So she's not. And trouble is, there's not a line where they say you don't cross this. You know, you can go this far but no farther. So it's just a balancing act. And she so far has not gone over anything. But I don't think when you make or I do think that when you make your point, your takeaway to the story, that you're going to have to be very careful that it's not a totally, I hate to say it this way, but totally focused on God. You can focus on God without talking about God. And that's one thing I say in my workshops is you can incorporate godly principles, godly not testimony. They don't want testimony. They don't want preaching. So one thing you can do is you can incorporate that without directly talking about God. And when you think about the parables that Jesus told in the Bible, none of them actually mention God. He talks about godly principles without ever, actually mentioning God. And so I think that's one thing she'll have to be very careful about doing here. Is she said she wants to please Him, but I think you need to just kind of maybe just very lightly say that once she focused on cooperating with God, that He gave her the power to overcome the feelings of depression and all and negativity that she was facing. So since we don't have the rest of the story, it's hard for me to really determine how much more she could and couldn't say without going too far for Chicken Soup for the Soul. But I hope that makes sense. And I do think this is a good story, and she's got a good beginning here. And I'm going to stop share so you can see if we have any questions here.
Okay. It seems to me, just in my personal writing, for work and so forth that I've had occasion to do through the years, I can ramble without realizing that I'm rambling. I can repeat myself using different words, but it's the same idea, the same concept. And when I go back through and I'm reviewing that, wow, it's difficult because everyone has an element of every line or phrase or sentence, or maybe even a chunk of paragraph has something I want to say, but I really need to take 28 and make them 3 powerful.
Right. Exactly.
They're squirrely for me. Let's see. Angie Mays is wondering how to share Word documents for editing like this. She's used Google Docs before, but that's not really suiting her purposes.
Okay. I just use email. I just have them email it as an attachment, and then I email it. I make my changes and use the track changes and then email it back. That's what I do. Okay.
Barb Haley says she shares files with Dropbox, or she just uses an attachment to an email. Let's see. That's all we have right this minute. Let me check and see that make sure I've still got the freshest version of all of our comments, Tracy.
Okay.
Do you find it? Let me see. There we go. There we go. Angie and Barbara are conversing. Do you find it as an editor, when you have a piece that's really good like this, very strong, doesn't need a lot of edits, do you, I don't really know how to articulate my question. Do you enjoy it more? Do they need you less? Do you, I mean, is that, tell us the difference from an editor's viewpoint in the two works. Both are good, very good. One needed a little bit more clarification than the other, and you must see some that are very egregious and they're just all over the place. So in the scope of, from your viewpoint, working with that message, that piece of work, is it, do you get pleasure from it? Do you question it? Do you get frustrated? I'm not articulating this well.
No, I mean, it moves faster, flows better if they have, as I mentioned, this one writer that I've edited for several times, and he's learned, from what we've done in the past. This time it's going a lot faster, and so because of that, he will probably pay less, for my editing, and that's great. But no, I love to help people improve their work. That's to me, that's what I'm editing for. And even in the second piece, I couldn't, it's hard to do live, but I probably would have made more comments as far as, why don't you tighten this? Why don't you drop this and condense this, or put these two things together? So I probably would have made more comments even than I did verbally. I would probably, highlight some things and say, you could probably condense these, put these together, whatever. But no, I mean, that's what I'm here for, and I enjoy it all.
Okay. So in a edit that wasn't live, then you wouldn't just say, condense these 3 or 4 paragraphs into X number of sentences. You would help them do that. This is extraneous. Let's get rid of that. This is repetition. Let's move that out. Move this down here. Put that up there. You'd help them do the work, wouldn't you?
Right. I would, and I would actually make suggestions. A lot of times I do make suggestions on, why don't you do it, and then type out. And once again, I don't want to ever change a writer's voice. So if it doesn't sound like what they would use, I would not want them to use it. But I will make suggestions because it's hard to envision by just saying, well, condense this. What does that mean? So sometimes I'll make suggestions on exactly how they could do it, and then they can change it up however they want. Because
they've already done their best and sent it to you.
Yeah, right.
They need that second pair of eyes.
Exactly. That's right.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're doing good.
All right, ready to go on the third piece.
Please.
Okay, and these are 3 very different pieces. I love it because that helps us see just all different kinds of writing and how they differ. Let me put this, come on, okay. Let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see it better. Okay, there. This is an op-ed piece. So this is going to be done entirely differently from the other pieces. First of all, it is appropriate to use present tense in an op-ed piece. This is for a newspaper. This is your opinion. This is one writer writing in with his or her opinion on an issue. And let me say, this is a hot issue right now, and I hope this writer will get this in quickly because I think this is a great piece. It is, of course, about the abortion problem that we're seeing, the New York law that just came in, was just passed. So you would use present tense, and she has done that. You would also use your facts and figures, where I said in the Chicken Soup for the Soul story, you don't want facts. It's not imparting information, it's telling a story. This is imparting information. So that's entirely appropriate to this type of piece. Now, let me read the first paragraph. I want to mention what I think would help it to be even a little bit stronger. If you've ever cuddled a newborn baby, you can't help but feel outrage at the recent passage of a New York state law that allows abortion up to the time of birth. Other states consider following suit. I think this is good. I think this is strong. But let me tell you what I've heard some people say, where you say you can't help but feel outrage. some people say, don't tell me what to feel. Don't tell me what to think. It doesn't bother me personally, but some people will look at it that way. So how about making it more personal to you and say, whenever I cuddle my newborn grandchild, I can't help but feel outrage at the recent passage. So that puts the feeling on you. That's your feeling, and you are totally entitled to your feelings. And nobody's going to take offense by thinking that you are telling them what to feel. So that's just one thought that might make this a little bit more palatable for the newspaper readers. And now down here, then she starts, she tells about the Declaration of Independence, says we're all created equal, God-given rights. But now fully formed babies, little people, are denied those rights. Let me turn my track changes on, which I did not do. Okay, and then this is, I'm sure she meant this to be an M dash.
Would you explain the difference?
Mm-hmm. An M dash is, it's like two, well, it's the size of an M. It's like two, usually in Microsoft Word, it will create an M dash when you put two dashes together.
And you're saying M as in Mary.
Two hyphens. Pardon?
You're saying M as in Mary for people
Mary,
who don't know.
M dash, yes. Now there are N dashes, and those are used in other situations. But like what she's got here, where she's setting off what they call parenthetical information, they are little people. She's setting that off for emphasis, and you would use M dashes to do that. M dashes with no spaces on either side. So now it shows that I've deleted the two hyphens and then put the M dash in there. So that's what she did. All right. Then she goes down to quote Charles Dickens wrote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." And then she does a great job of showing two contrasting situations that illustrate this. And but she starts out by saying, "We live in the best of times." That kind of caught me for just a minute because I thought, well, you just said they just passed this horrible law. Why are you saying we live in the best of times? So you could say something like, in many ways, we live in the best of times. And then she goes on to say medical technology produces miracles. So you could say, in many ways, we live in the best of times, such as medical technology producing miracles. And then she goes to tell her story. 44 years ago, my only daughter died at birth. Although she weighed 5 pounds, her lungs were not fully developed. Had Christy Marie been born today, she would probably have survived and thrived. So we understand right away why you're saying these are the best of times today, because if your daughter had lived nowadays, she would have lived. Then she goes to the contrast, but it's also the worst of times, because we're allowing babies with fully developed lungs to be killed for the sake of convenience. And I think that is a great point. I would delete the comma here in front of because. Because is what we call an essential subordinating conjunction. And so in other words, it's essential material that's coming after this. So you don't need a comma with that. That's just getting a little more technical than you probably need. And then she goes on to make the point that people seem to be more concerned about animals, and about a video that she watched where they were chanting different things. Protesters were chanting up in front of a facility for animal research. You need a comma here because chanting is like a dialogue tag. It's a type of dialogue tag. Now, here where she said it's not science, it's violence. Animal lives are their right. We have just begun to fight. I wouldn't put two quotations back to back because it's just a little confusing. I would pick one or the other. And to me, animal lives are their right. We have just begun to fight makes your point better, because you're talking about animals having rights, but people don't have rights. These babies don't have rights. And then she goes on to tell about a cartoon. And I think that's a neat illustration too, and that lawmakers seem more concerned today about animals than children. Okay. Now, she mentions about babies' organs being used. And she says, at what cost? And then she says, the cost of the life of another child. I think I would delete the cost of. the second time, I don't think that needs to be repeated. Okay, so at what cost the life of and I would say a child instead of another child, because you haven't really been talking about another child. So at what cost the life of a child? What is wrong with society that allows the slaughter of innocents? Then she goes down here and she says, we have lost respect for life. Each person is uniquely created by God. I think I would switch those two sentences. Each person is uniquely created by God. We have lost the respect for life. And then she goes on to tell how we've lost that respect. There have been long and hard fights to gain respect for people of different color, for people, I would say, with disabilities instead of disability, for people of different faiths. And Christians have been at the forefront until now. And then she says, now the tide has turned and Christians are put down for fighting the lives of babies. Well, first of all, the tide has turned is a cliche, and you want to avoid cliches. You want to say things in a unique way, and cliches don't work. So actually, I think you could delete that entire section right there. Christians have been at the forefront until now. And then your next paragraph tells how they're not now at the forefront. We've lost our sense of right and wrong. The Bible is considered irrelevant in a society that makes its own rules. There's no authority. Some of these, one thing I did notice, that some of these sentences are very short. And in fact, even using sentence fragments. And then sometimes that's good, especially when you have action, you want to use short sentences. I think I would tend here to vary my sentence length a little bit. That keeps the interest high. And then she says that chaos reigns, each man or woman does what is right in his or her own eyes. There's a whole book about that. You want to avoid, also, there's another thing you want to avoid is using there is or there was. That is just a weak sentence construction. And you could just say a whole biblical book about that is called, was written about that, called Judges. And if you think judgment will not fall on America for this crass disregard for human life, you are mistaken. Okay, that way you can get rid of there is, there was. Up here, there is no authority. Well, it's occasionally all right, but I just would not overuse there is and there was. And then where she says you are mistaken, I would be very careful, because when you slip back into second person, it's like you're pointing the finger.
Where are you? Where's the cursor?
I'm sorry, back here, right here.
Thank you.
You are mistaken. If you think judgment will not fall on America for this, you are mistaken. So I think you could keep that in first person. If we think judgment will not fall on America for this crass disregard for human life, we may be mistaken, or we are mistaken. I just think you need to be very careful not to point the finger and because when you do, it makes the reader take offense, and then the reader, you're going to lose the reader. The reader's not going to listen probably to the rest of what you have to say. So try not to slip into second person. And then she goes on to say about we've lost our sense of wonder. I think you could probably condense some of this. I think this is good, what we've lost, but I think we probably could condense a little bit. And as telling about babies are cute and helpless, we feed them, clothe them, and that sort of thing. And we videotape their first steps. It's also wondrous. But now dozens, hundreds, thousands, millions. I'm not really sure why there's a question mark with 2 parentheses around it. And I think I would just go, we know millions of babies have already been aborted. So I would just stay with 1. I would just say millions of babies may never experience such milestones. Babies who might have grown up to make the world a better place are robbed of that opportunity. I think that's a great point right there. And then she said, I've watched videos where OBGYN doctors testify that there's no reason to abort full-term babies to save a mother ever. Process would be called delivery, and the baby should be cared for. You might say would be cared for instead of should be. And then she's, we don't have the entire piece, so I don't know what her closing paragraphs are, but this is all very good. Like I say, I would stick with first person to avoid pointing the finger, but other than that, this is very well done, and I think would make a powerful op-ed piece. I think it would be very, very well received at most newspapers, unless, depending on how liberal they are. Some will not take it, but some probably would. So let me stop sharing and see what questions we have.
Okay, so this is just all three stories have in their different ways. I have a personal reaction to each story, so I'm processing my personal reaction and having a hard time keeping a safe distance in order to help somebody edit their work. Is that something that's natural to you? Did you develop that muscle through the years of critiquing yourself, critiquing others, and being critiqued?
As far as maintaining a distance to it, I guess you do have to kind of develop that. It is hard because with our own work we can't see it. We are so close to it. But with somebody else's work, it is a little bit easier, and with time and experience, I think it does get easier even more. So.
Okay. Excuse me, Barb Haley was wondering, for you, the way that you work, when you notice a pattern of errors, the same thing repeated over and over, do you mark each instance? Because she's an editor also. Do you mark each instance, or do you just make a note of it later, or how do you address that, Tracy?
Okay, when editing, yes, I do. I correct each one because, like I say, to me, they're paying me to correct their manuscript. When I critique, now I tend to do that. I shouldn't, because our rules actually say don't point it out every single time. Like if they are not using a comma in their compound sentences, ideally just say, be sure to check your compound sentences and add a comma, in each one. But some of our people, we've had one dyslexic lady that was in our critique group at one time, and she wanted me to point out every single one because she actually published quite a bit, but she didn't want to send it to the magazine or wherever she was publishing with those errors in it. So she wanted me to point that out. But yes, in editing, I do correct every comma, every punctuation, every capitalization error that I see.
Okay. So it's a little bit different for demonstration purposes because of the time factor, right?
Right, yes. Yeah, and I probably didn't catch every one.
Let's see. We had a couple of comments from Judy about the chicken soup for the soul. We're going to run over everybody. We're just going to run over them. So do you want to... Please do not apologize. Everybody's loving this. Do not apologize. I prefer the big screen, but that wasn't possible while you were talking. So now I'm tethered to my small screen.
Yeah.
We will do our best to keep this to 4:10. If that would be maybe 4:15. And of course, watch the replay if you can. Come back and get that last little bit so we can complete the process. With your permission, would you let us know if you can stay? Excuse me. Judy has two thoughts about the Chicken Soup for the Soul article. She said she was just thinking out loud. Could the writer perhaps show her information by putting it in more into story form, perhaps even adding dialogue, and then that gives you permission to move around, maneuver a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that Chicken Soup for the Soul says or suggests is that you include dialogue. But you have to be very careful with it because dialogue lengthens the story so much. They have a set amount of space set off for each story. And with dialogue, you have to start a new paragraph with each new speaker. So what I say in my workshops is sprinkle a little bit in, but not a whole lot. But yes, dialogue is a great way, just like that first piece we talked about, great way to show your characters without all telling and narrating.
And you mentioned earlier that there was a word limit on the Chicken Soup for the Soul, 1,200 words. That's tight, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. It can be. And I actually tell people that I think if you write it even tighter, maybe stick around 800 words or so, you may even have a better chance of getting in because, everybody is, we're ready for a quick read and ready to move on to something else. So I think even tighter. And a lot of times when we tighten our stories, just like that one, I think they're even better.
Yes. So that's not official, but with your experience, that's an educated opinion, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's not something the editors have said, but yes, it's what I've found.
Thank you. Judy's also wondering about there's the second or the third one where the author used the word theme twice about, well, there's the animal rights. So could the writer eliminate that word and make it a stronger statement? I've always heard that seem and appear and any other form of word similar weaken the content. Do you agree?
I agree. They're actually linking verbs like to be verbs, and those are weaker verbs. And you're absolutely right. We need to watch those to be verbs and all those linking verbs so that we can usually make them stronger.
Janet Warren Lane says this is a super valuable learning experience. Yes. Adria Wilkins is here. Mary Poliva from Bulgaria. Hello, Mary. We love it when you show up because you're our international star.
Yeah.
She's wondering, do you read the manuscripts the second time after the author has or has not accepted your recommendations? And if you did, my question, addendum to that, would that be an extra charge because it's more time?
Right. As part of my first edits, I usually will go through the whole thing on screen on my computer. Then I will print it out and go through it again, as long as I'm still within the amount that I quoted them. And they've accepted, I have a contract each time. And if I'm within that time period still, I will go through it, because you will not believe how much different it is reading it in a hard copy than reading it online. You find totally different things. And so I will usually do that. But if after I've sent it to them, in fact, this is part of the contract, anything after this we'll have to have a new contract for.
Okay.
So yes.
And that's fair to both parties.
Right.
Excuse me. Lee Pollock says, wow, this is so helpful.
Good.
Janet Warren Lane says, no problem, keep going. Jean McMahon, says, you did a wonderful thing. Thank you so much. Let's see. Marlene Houck is asking, is there a checklist of words to avoid that she might be able to just look online? Example, it, this, and so forth. Perhaps the list would also include things like passive voice, filter words, and so on. I see, is there a website that lists things to avoid? Are you aware of that, Tracy?
I'm not right now, no. These are just things I've learned kind of over time through being in critique groups and writing and editing and that sort of thing. So I'm not familiar. I read off a list of filter words that a lady provided when she wrote an article for my newsletter, The Right Life, just a couple of months ago. And I thought, oh, what perfect timing, So, and I had never really heard them called filtering words, but that's a good term for them. You're filtering what you're seeing and hearing and experiencing, through your, instead of just telling what you're seeing and hearing and experiencing. So,
okay.
But I wish there were. That would be good.
Excuse me. And we do have 2 handouts. I'm going to share that link in just a moment. And they're easy references. Okay, they're not the workshop that we've just done. They're not the master class. They're handy references that and some of those ideas, that same concept is involved. Lauren Jan Kraft says, love this. Makes me less apprehensive about sending my baby to an editor.
Yeah. Oh, good.
That is our goal today.
That's
right. Shirley Brasius, would it be good to close such an op-ed piece with a Bible verse, do you think?
Usually they say don't open or close with Bible verses. I can't tell you exactly what the thinking is there, but they usually say don't do that. And especially, I don't know what paper it's being sent to, so I'm not sure how well received that would be. It may or may not. So I think my answer would be no. I don't think I would.
Err on the side of being conservative. Let's see. Angie May says she is especially hearing your heart to help and guide. Christy Horion says, I really appreciate the kindness that you're showing while editing. You're honest, professional, and kind. This is so rare, so keep up the great work. Tracy.
I don't ever want to crush a writer's spirit. I don't, and I apologize if I have in any way. But yeah, and every piece can be improved. My pieces all need improvement.
Mhm.
So I don't care if you're, like I said before in my workshop that we did a week ago, I don't care if you're a beginner or a pro, every piece can be improved.
Every piece. Evelyn is giving a suggestion, Evelyn Mann, to look up weasel words, like the animal weasel
Yeah.
words on Google or YouTube. I completely forgot that, Evelyn. Thank you very much.
Yeah. There are a lot of those.
Angie Mays says Jerry Jenkins has a list of power verbs. I love those power verbs. I love them. Every time I see a list, I collect it. Okay. We may have other comments or questions, but while everybody's doing that, let's go talk about this fabulous conference that we want to talk about.
Right.
Let me close this or reduce this a little bit so it's not. There we go. Let me go over here to Mid-South. I thought I had it open, but sometimes I'm wrong. Oh, gracious. So what I'll do is I'll try to quickly go through some things, and then I want to be thorough and quick, and sometimes that's not possible. So, but I don't want to exclude you because you have inside information, all right?
Right.
So let me give it a run and see what happens.
Okay.
You know, viewers, I always like to show you the website. Feel free to continue posting comments or questions. Tracy, will you be able to come back afterwards and maybe address a few of those?
Sure.
After the program ends?
Yeah.
Okay. So the conference that we're highlighting today is the Mid-South Christian Writers Conference, held March the 15th and the 16th, as you can see on the screen, in Collierville, Tennessee. That's near Memphis. You would fly in, if you're flying, you would fly into the Memphis International Airport. That's the closest. You don't have to do that, of course, but that's the closest. Now, really, this is a one-day conference that has two pre-conference workshops, one of which is already full and has a waiting list behind it. Excuse me. The conference name, Mid-South Christian Writers Conference. The dates are March the 15th and the 16th. On Friday, if you do the pre-conference, then the Friday is a registration opens at 8 a.m. and the conference runs from 9 to 5. And then Saturday it runs from 8 to 5.
No, it's only Saturday that we open at 8 and we run 9 to 5. Fridays is a 1 to 5 workshop, 1 to 5 in the afternoon.
So registration is not available on Friday. It's only on Saturday?
Right. Okay. And really, well, I mean, we will go ahead and get those checked in who also registered for the Friday workshop. So yeah, they'll be registered for the next day.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And the price is just crazy. And, you know, there are a lot of big national or big, large regional conferences, and every conference, no matter its size, no matter its location, no matter its offering, has its own place in the kingdom work, okay? This is a smaller conference, and yet it's got tremendous punch. Great people here, great leaders, great keynoters and so forth. The price is great too. The early bird price, which is effective through February the 23rd, okay, $80. Okay, and that pays for one day, the Saturday part of the conference, and a box lunch. No lodging. Okay, lodging's on your own. If you wait after the 23rd, then you can still get the box lunch, but you're going to pay $90. The price goes up $10. What I'd really like to do is talk about your workshop. And you've just given us a great slice of that today. Tell us about your workshop. But before you do, there are 2 Friday workshops, 4 hours apiece. They last 4 hours apiece. The second option with Johnny Alexander is completely full. She's going to do opening scene critiques, all right? You can get on a wait list. I'm sure the wait list is full as well, but it never hurts to ask to be added, all right? That's the second option that's listed on the website, but the first option listed is Stirring the Pot. Ta-da! Take it away, Tracy.
All right. Well, we do, Andy Lehman and I do this together, and we do 2 hours of teaching about what Chicken Soup wants, what they don't want, how you can come up with a good story, and then we do a 2-hour breakout sessions. And so you get to experience all of it, but 1 hour with me and 1 hour with Andy. And Andy is just so full of energy. I'm telling you, they have so much fun in there. But what I do is dissecting the chicken, and we talk about the beginnings and middles and ends of a chicken soup story, and I have lots of examples. And then Andy does web mind mapping is what she calls it. And they come up with ideas. So you will actually leave with ideas for stories for upcoming books. that you can actually submit after you leave the conference. And then you will also, in my part of it, you'll get a little bit of a start on a beginning and maybe an ending for that story, or one particular story that you choose. So it's a lot of fun, and we'll actually have something to submit or about ready to submit.
I love results-oriented training.
Mm-hmm.
Theory has its place, and we have to have that. We can't get results-oriented. We can't understand the results-oriented training until we understand the foundational truths and concepts that it stands upon.
Right.
But I really like that you're marketing it. This is what it is. This is what you're going to get. And when it's finished, boom, this is what you have in your hand when you walk out the door. And that's just something we can sink our teeth in. And it's yours is $55. Is that right?
Well, it's $35 if you register for the conference too. But if you only want the Friday workshop, then it would be $55.
Okay.
Most people do.
That's in my notes, but I don't see that at the note that I'm looking at right now. And Johnny Alexander's is a little bit less, just a hair less, but again, it's full. The lodging is around there. There's so many different choices: Marriott, Hyatt, Fairfield Inn, Hampton Inn, Days Inn, and they've got special deals with them, so you don't have to pay full price. Saturday, there are 10 workshops. I think this is fantastic. For a one-day workshop, 10 workshops, that's putting a lot into that day.
It is. Now, you can only choose 3. We have 3 session times. But this year, something new that we've tried to do a little bit something new every year. And we've tried not to grow too fast, but God's had some other ideas. Last year, we had 130 attendees, which I think is fantastic. Not anything I ever expected. And we are on tap now to have even more than that this year. But this year, what we're going to do is repeat one of the workshops. People complained that they couldn't get to everything they wanted to go to, which I understand. But so each session we have three original workshops and then 1 repeat. So if you miss something one time around, hopefully you'll get it another time. And then we have the keynote sessions, 2 keynote sessions with Bob Hostetler, and then we have the meet and greets Friday night, and then we have one-on-one sessions where you can make a 15-minute appointment. We have agents and editors that are not even presenting, that are there just to talk to attendees about their work and how they can submit it and that kind of thing. So I just think it's got a little bit of everything for everybody.
You get in, you get the job done, and you get out.
That's right. That's right.
Excuse me. Some of the mentors are Julie Gwynn, if you know these names. Julie Gwynn, John Woodhams, Kathy Kretzinger, and Deborah Butterfield. Some of those are agents. Some of those are, John, for example, works at Guideposts. I mean, a really wide spectrum of major outlets that you're offering access to.
That's right. And of course, Bob Hostetler, our keynote, he's also an agent. So he'll be there to talk to people too. He's so good.
He's so good. I've never known anything. Excuse me. I've never known him to do anything less than perfect. Excuse me. Christy Hines, Tracy and Andy came to Lexington, Kentucky, and presented, because this Chicken Soup for the Soul workshop that you and Andy present, as I understand it, you travel.
We do within about 5 to 6 hours of the Memphis area, and Christy hosted one of our workshops. We had a blast.
She said it was amazing.
She's so sweet.
Sherry Hunt says you did a great job today. Excuse me. I was completely fine until it's time my turn to talk, and my allergies are kicking in. Thank you so much for being with us, Tracy. I know already that we would like to have you back. I'm not going to burden you every week or anything crazy, but this has been so helpful. People are really getting their teeth into it. And for me, part of my work is to break down barriers. People think this is too much for me. I'm not worthy of this. This is going to be too expensive. And when they start to see and have access to the training that's available, the knowledge base that's there, they begin to say, maybe I'm eligible for this blessing as well. And you have helped do that today. Thank you very much. Thank you, viewers. We so appreciate you being here. You know, we love serving you. We just love serving you. And we're very glad that you're here. Very thankful. This has been Marketers on a Mission, episode number 231. We watched 3 submissions, professionally edited, live, baby, live, with writer and editor Tracy Crump. Tomorrow, we're having a brainstorming session. Author and conference director Linda Gilden, she's going to return. She also presented at the summit, and she's going to return to teach us how one single idea can become many articles, many blog posts, and even books. We're here every weekday, whether the summit's on or whether we're finished with the summit. We're here every weekday to serve you. 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern, specifically designed to serve you, help you learn the craft of professional writing, speaking, and marketing, online marketing, from those who are already doing it. Because there are people who are hungry for your message and they're online. There's a different level of communication. It has to be more succinct. It has to be more specific when you communicate online. When we're talking to our friends in real life or online, we can, a lot of things are just taken for granted. Those things are unknown online with a stranger that we're trying to serve or we're trying to connect with. We need to be able to be very sure about what it is that we are sharing so that they can see us, our hand raised, and come and hear our message. And lives are changed. And for some people, their eternity is changed. If this is perhaps your first foray into the summit, this is the first day of our bonus week. The official summit has already closed down last Friday. It was 4 weeks long and it was amazing. If you'd like to enroll, you still can get access to all of the entire 5 weeks of recordings for free because of the guests, the presenters' generosity. After the summit ends, you'll be able to get access to that. So go to my website, marketersonamission.com, and enroll for free, and then you'll have free access till December 31st. That's a pretty good deal, isn't it, Tracy?
Right. It's a great deal. And it's free.
Free! Excellence for free. That's a rarity these days.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. We'll come back and check questions and comments. Appreciate you staying over a little bit. Have a good afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.